Hey everyone, welcome back to Self-Directed. Today we're going to talk about how to create your own individualized curriculum for a particular topic of interest. So you come across some topic, maybe it's outside of work or something to do with work, and you want to do a deep dive, you want to research, you want to go down the rabbit hole of this particular topic. How do you get started? How would you approach that? So Mitchell, what are you studying right now?
Fun topic. It's a fun topic to talk about, and something that I think I'm notoriously both bad and good at. And bad because I have a tendency to become really monomaniacal around a single topic whenever I get my interest piqued, and buy every possible book and have this huge reading list and all this stuff that it's impossible for me to consume it all in a short amount of time. But good in the manner that a lot of that kind of obsessiveness, whenever I find something I'm interested in, that really translates into learning and in sprints, I think, which is something that has always been accidental, but just the way that I kind of find myself learning best. And one of the topics that I'm still very fascinated in, I started down this rabbit trail about a little over 12 months ago, probably, is copywriting and the psychology of marketing and advertising. And I've been down that rabbit trail deep for the past 12 months. It's been a fun one. And that's one that it's been fun to look at the journey kind of in retrospect, because I feel like I've done a decent job keeping track too.
Yeah. So is this something that's related to the work you're doing, or was it just kind of a intellectual curiosity?
A little bit of both, but I think that the initiating event, let's talk about what was it that even opened my eyes to there's this thing out here that I need to know about. And it was listening to podcasts, and it was listening to podcasts that were talking about things that I was already interested in. So, this podcast talking about communicating with other people, about being more effective as a marketer and building a brand that people want to engage with. And it was actually Seeking Wisdom. So Drift's podcast, great podcast. It was some of these early episodes that I went back through, and I binge listened to 100 episodes in a few weeks. But there was so much different talk in some of these early episodes talking about marketing greats, studying the marketing greats, studying these people who were great admin of the past. And it was talking about the fundamentals of everything. All the fundamentals behind advertising and marketing have never changed, but everywhere you look today, there are all these blog posts for optimizing things and all these things it's all this noise that's really easy to get lost in. And I think it was the first time that I was like, holy shit, I don't know these fundamental things that I think I know and should know as well as I, would like to know to be better at my job as a marketer. And so I went down this rabbit trail first, just by diving in to figure out, well, what are the books and greats and all the people that I should know about that I don't know about now? And that was the first domino of what's become really kind of an obsession over the past, 12 plus months.
Okay. So let's break that down. So what was the actual kind of first domino getting started listening to this particular podcast, Seeking Wisdom?
Yeah, let's call that the very first domino.
Yep. And on that podcast, they were referencing and making recommendations on hey, here are some of the fundamentals of copywriting, of sales, marketing, psychology. So that kind of gave you a good starting point of okay, I'm going to check these books out, or, these resources.
I think that's part of it. I think what triggered me is a little bit more nuanced than that, even, is that they were talking about things I thought I knew somewhat, I had a decent understanding of already. And the way they were talking about it made me realize that I actually had a very, very shallow understanding of something that I thought I had a pretty good understanding of. And so it was okay, wait, there's there's this imbalance between the level I think I'm at and where I'm really at. And I'm clear. It's very clear to me based on the way that they're talking about stuff that I don't know what I'm talking about. And I need to go back to the drawing board and study some of these things.
Yeah. So I guess what I'm trying to break down is, if someone's interested in exploring a new topic, they don't know what they don't know. So like, where do you get started?
Yeah. So for me, it's what has always made me obsessive about topics is kind of this intersection of fascination and vulnerability. And what I mean by that is like the ideas that I could just spend hours and hours laying awake at night thinking about, and also the things that I want to have an answer on. If somebody asks me about this particular thing, I want to have mastery, or I want to be competent enough to have a conversation about that. And whenever there's a topic that I care about and an aspect of that comes up that I feel really vulnerable, that I'm not really well versed in, that like drives me crazy. And I'm like, I have to go learn everything about this. And it may be different for everybody else, but I think, if it's the fundamental part that I think everybody does have is like, there are things that fascinate you. That's a good place. That's a good indicator of something that you could go spend time and enjoy pursuing, your own learning on.
So what's the first thing you do? Do you start doing a bunch of Google searches and just, following different trails and stuff until you land on something like, oh, this is good?
Yeah, I think that's where I started before I realized there's probably ways to do better at this. Like, you can't go wrong with a simple Google search by diving down a rabbit trail. And I think that this also differs on like how big of a topic is this? Is this something that you're trying to find a very immediately actionable piece of advice on? Or is this something that like fascinates you truly, like you want to learn more about it? You've already done some learning about, or you've already been curious about this in the past. For me, when it's those types of things where it's like, this is some big crazy idea that, I could read for hours and hours and still never know everything about it. That's where I've learned to, and maybe not learned, I've practiced enough and forced myself to try and be a little bit more methodical about the way that I go about learning. So yes, it usually does start with a Google search, or for instance, in this particular case, I was already listening to a podcast that had a lot of really valuable information on it. They were already dropping tons of names of people who were like masters of the craft, years ago. They're like, you should know all these names. So that was first. I was like, I should know all these names. Who are these people? I don't know anything about these people. And simultaneously, they're talking about all these books. These are, oh my gosh, these are the 6 best copywriting books, marketing books anybody should know. And so it's like, okay, I'm going to take a list of all those things. And I'm going to go listen to every one of these podcasts until I have kind of this giant list of names and books and blog posts and bloggers and writers and kind of everybody that I think, I trust these two people talking about this. So everybody that they've thought was credible, I'm going to go start exploring there and just kind of pull on the string and see what unravels.
Gotcha. All right, so you're at the stage, you got a bunch of recommendations, you have a bunch of content you can explore. How do you keep track of all of it? What do you do specifically?
Yeah, great question. So there's a really interesting book I read several years ago that is like, it's an old book. It's one it seems obvious and you probably wouldn't hear about it unless somebody recommended it to you, but somebody recommended it to me 4 or 5 years ago, and it's changed the way that I approach new topics. And it's called How to Read a Book by Mortimer Adler. Mortimer Adler is the guy who put together the Great Books of the World series. Just brilliant guy, has a lot of great writing, but that book changed the way that I go about trying to dive deep into a new topic. And it's like, okay, reading for comprehension on a first take is very difficult. Reading and trying to like saturate yourself with the ideas is a really good first way to approach something that you're learning for the first time.
Kind of being allow yourself just to consume the content.
Yep.
Don't worry about, okay, am I taking all of this in? What are the specifics and stuff? Kind of do a broader introduction to new content in that way.
Yeah, go get your foot in the door. Like, go dip your toe into the water and get a little bit comfortable with the ideas first. And then maybe go back and reread that book for comprehension. And what I like to do now, and this has been a process that I've gotten better at over time, I've learned what works for me, is when I read something for the first time, I go through and I'm much less reverent than I used to be. I used to have this weird tendency to I didn't want to write in books. I didn't want to dog ear pages. Like I wanted to books were sacred to me growing up. And I was, I probably cheated myself out of a lot of comprehension because I didn't do the things to help make the most use out of a book. And now it's like, I scribble, I highlight, I take notes in the margin, I dog ear pages, and I reread a book until I just have it. And now on that second or third pass, I can go back and I can hone in on the sections that really spoke to me the first time. And that's when I go in and I start taking notes. Like I'll go take my favorite quotes, I'll put them in notes, or I'll write out about those ideas. Or I'll go make kind of an action list of what are the things that are immediately actionable for me that that got the wheels turning. And I try and take as much of the information out of something that I read as possible versus just letting it stay on the pages of the book. I try and put that somewhere where I can easily access it later, and not everything, but the stuff that I know that is a useful thing for me to reference down the road.
Okay. Where do you keep those types of notes?
So as far as very topical things that are directly relatable to stuff that I work on, professionally or whatever. In this particular case, it's sales, marketing, copywriting, all that or whatever. I have a Trello board where I pretty much store everything that I read, blog posts, podcasts, mental models, Google, Excel templates, all of my favorite speeches and quotes and every book. And I put a ton of notes in there. And when I'm in that process of reading books, I keep them all in my phone app notes or my laptop apps, my laptop notes app and then I go transfer the stuff as it's useful.
Gotcha. So that's Trello. So it's kind of like a living, breathing syllabus that you're building over time, kind of. Or
yeah.
a reading list.
And it didn't start that way either. This Trello board in particular, I think I started in 2016, and it's got, tons of books, tons of blog posts, tons of email templates, things that I've liked over time. And this is a cool thing that I've learned from that exact same, listening to the Drift podcast and following the Drift marketing team and reading some of their books, is they talk about a swipe file. Go steal the things that other people do really well, not so you can copy them verbatim, but so that you can use the same things that they did that worked and apply them to your own business. And go I think, what is it, Austin Kleon has a book called Steal Like an Artist.
Yeah.
Too. And I like those mental models where it's go take the things that other people are already doing and use those to your advantage. So you have a starting point whenever you're trying to do something down the road. For this particular subject matter, sales, marketing, revenue type things, I have this massive kind of warehouse of information that I've accumulated over the past 4.5 years, books, thoughts, quotes, and all these examples that it's okay, when I'm now looking for this thing for the first time, I no longer have to reinvent the wheel and start from square one. I can go at least start my search in this place where I know I have all these ideas stored from the past.
Yeah, I love that, because even if you're not, in there on a regular, consistent basis, I think the act of, okay, this is where I store all of this type of information, these resources, and I'm building it up over time. Now you can go hey, it's been 3 months, it's been 6 months, I'm going to go revisit all this stuff. And just by having it all in one place, it's going to trigger like a lot of different things you've already consumed and kind of bring them top of mind. And I think it's really cool to be able to, just from a personal standpoint, to be able to track all that stuff over time. And you can see like it kind of like, it's like memory flashbacks of like, oh, like I started from scratch 4 years ago. And you can kind of recall like after a year or so, or in the middle of this deep dive, this is generally how much I knew then, and look how much I've grown over time.
Yeah. And I did it. So I did another thing recently too. And this is more broadly speaking, how do you get better about tracking the stuff you're learning? And this was a useful exercise, and I've been keeping it up to date since I finally put in the legwork. But I went back through the past 5 years of books that I've purchased, books and audiobooks that I've purchased through Amazon, which is like, thanks Amazon for storing all this. And like, it's useful that I buy almost all of my books from the same place already, and audiobooks. So I went back through for like 5 years worth of purchases, and I made a spreadsheet of when I bought it and when I thought I read it. And like, I put some tags in another cell of like, what were those topics about? And I put them, and I sorted them by date of when I thought I read them, or, or there's a long list of those that I haven't read yet that are on the list. But I could kind of see like, this is really interesting to go back through all these books and topics and see kind of like how I was progressing through different ideas. And it's like, I went down this particular rabbit trail about copywriting and sales and marketing. And I found myself in a really interesting place, like buying a bunch of books about psychology, and buying books about like buying a ton of business memoirs that were like offshoots, people that weren't even in these industries I was interested in, but had really cool points of views. And it was really cool to see, as I thought back through those things, some of these pivotal books that like filled gaps in between things I was already exploring.
Yeah. Do you wish that you were even more structured and disciplined about tracking, hey, here's what I've consumed over time, documenting notes and all that type of stuff from this is really valuable to be able to understand like where I was at these different stages, and, how I've branched off in different areas. And it's like a culmination of your personal like educational journey. Or like, I love that idea in theory, but it seems like it would take a lot of work to implement that at a high level in practice. And it's like, it kind of takes the fun out of just like, all right, like here's a book, or here's a piece of content, here's a topic I'm going to do a deep dive on for, a day, a week, a month. And it's like, I don't want to put in the amount of work to document it. What do you think? Do you think the payoff is worth it?
There's a healthy balance to strike, even for me. And I love building spreadsheets probably more than anybody I've ever met. I love tracking things. I love like nerding out one afternoon when I'm just like frustrated about something else. I need a fun thing to kind of break loose, and like going back and like I built that whole spreadsheet going back through 5 years of books in like one sitting. And that was a fun exercise for me. But if I was going through this like really methodical process, it would get in the way of the goal for me. And the goal is like, I read because I'm interested in these ideas. And like, yes, there is some intentionality behind a lot of the books that I choose. Like I specifically want to get better at this idea, this one particular thing. I think that's going to be better. I'm going to be better as a result at what I do for my job. But I don't have that idea and go read that book out of an obligation. It's because I truly want to get better. And like when the administrative process becomes too cumbersome, it gets in the way of that. And so
it's similar like a traditional classroom setting.
Yeah.
Where it's like, it's going to get in the way of the intellectual curiosity journey,
Yeah. I will say though, that as I look back, and I reflect on like that list of books and things that I've learned, and even, even in areas that I've done well documenting in, there are different things that I wish I had done better. And I don't like, it's a big time cost to even do this every time I read a book or whatever. And I don't always read a book all the way from start to finish. So that's another hurdle here. But like, I wish I could go I wish I'd been writing a long summary for myself after every book that I read, even if I didn't finish it, because there's like hundreds of books over the past 5 or 6 years that I learned a ton from, or really changed my mind about something, or just like leveled me up about in a particular topic. And it's like, yeah, I have some notes in that, and I can go back and pick up that book and flip through, and I can read, but I don't have that in a really easily, readily available place.
Right. Yeah. It's almost, I think there is a balance that you can come up with of like, all right, here's a very simple documentation strategy I have. I'm not trying to do too much. Like, okay, I'm going to, like, I think a goal of every single takeaway or insight, I want to document it and take note of. Like, that's going to become a overwhelming and cumbersome process. And then I think you'll be less likely to keep it up. But, you know, like if someone, I think there's a few different ways to do it. One, like, hey, I'm going to write an Amazon review every time I finish a book, or, you know, a review on Goodreads or something like that. Or if it's something you wanted to keep more for yourself, like using Evernote or just like the Note app on your phone or your computer, you could do, like, let's say somebody had a daily habit of like, all right, every day I'm going to read for 15, 30 minutes. And then in your Notes app, you just jotted down, hey, what were the top 2 or 3 takeaways?
Yeah.
Like that type of note taking, I think, would compound over time. But even that, like, if
it takes
you do
a lot of discipline,
it's hard to manage. Like, all right, now you have to look back from like 6 months ago. Like, if you're doing it on that regular basis, it's going to be tough to keep up with.
Yeah, all of that, like all of that next level documenting what you're learning takes a ton of discipline, and there's definitely value to be had from it. But what I have found is kind of the 80-20 rule checks the box for me, is like, what's the immediate application of this?
Yeah.
And when I think about like sales and marketing, copywriting stuff in particular, I've been down a rabbit trail for the past, 12 plus months specifically on that. And
your documentation is through the actual work that you're doing.
Absolutely. So it was immediately after reading some of those books, my emails changed, and I think they got better. And I would say, I know they got better because they got more opens, they got more responses. And like, it was kind of fundamentally rethinking things and testing these ideas in real time in the real world. And I know not all ideas you're going to explore are as easy to take, have immediate application to whatever it is whatever area of your life.
There's almost like there's kind of like 2 different categories. Like, okay, something that's more directly applicable to the work you do or a project you're working on. And then there might be stuff, there might be topics of interest that are just more of like personal intellectual explorations and everything.
Yeah. And even those, so if you're somebody like me, I like to create a lot of content. I do. Even if I'm not publishing it, I write a ton of notes. I record my ideas. I journal a lot. And like, even when I read books that I'm not picking it up because I have any type of immediate application in mind, it's just something that's interesting to me. I find myself, the quality of my ideas and thinking about topics in general are so enriched from pulling those books off the shelf that are just pure interest. Like I have one in particular. I was reading The Ultimate Sales Letter by Dan Kennedy a while back, several months ago. I was reading, there was some other book in like a different topic. And then I picked up the Essays of Warren Buffett, which is like this recap of every investor letter Warren Buffett sent from, a CEO of Berkshire Hathaway over like a 30 plus year period. And Warren is talking about the types of businesses he invests in, why they matter to him, what are the most important things for a business to get right, and for him to believe they have long-term potential. And I'm reading about like this ultimate sales letter about like writing better copy to make people want to engage with your brand and business. And there was some other marketing book I was reading at the same time.
And it was starting to like connect dots between
all of them were like merging. And it was like this crazy how three different people from three entirely different segments. One is like very sales focused, one was very marketing focused, and one is like this investor mindset.
Yep.
All like mesh together these ideas in a much more like tangible way for me to understand how all of these things work together. And that was, like when you have those types of like epiphanies, I guess, that makes learning so much more fun. And that's why I think it is important sometimes to just like, don't worry about the documentation. Don't worry about the administrative process of learning. Just like pick up the book that you're interested in reading and go read that until you're not anymore.
Yeah, I think just being a voracious consumer of content, you're going to get more out of focusing on that than, emphasizing the documentation and like the note taking a little bit more. But I also think there's different personality types and whatnot. But yeah, I agree, and it's really interesting. Those are still relatively related perspectives. Like they're all on business and whatnot. What's incredible is when you can go, you assume different topics are going to be completely unrelated from one another, and then you start to connect the dots and see like patterns emerge and everything. That's when it gets really fun. If maybe there's something you're diving into that's work related, and then it's like, all right, more of like a personal hobby. I'm reading up on microbiology or sports history or something like that. Anyway, all right, I want to leave the audience with one question. If you're a young person, you're like, hey, like I haven't really done a deep dive on a particular topic like on my own. It's usually been, something I've discovered in a classroom setting or something like that. What would you like? How would you even go about picking something to like dive into? And let's say it's not directly related to work.
Yeah, I would say start with whatever it is that just is the most fascinating topic to you. Like it is very difficult to manufacture real desire. It's maybe impossible to just like make yourself really want to go pursue some idea that you're not truly interested in. And I think you do yourself a disservice if you try and force yourself to do that when there's something else out there more interesting to you. If there is something, start there. And you never know where that rabbit trail is going to lead you. I have discovered more topics that really excite me by just jumping down the rabbit hole of what excited me and like giving myself the freedom to get off track and get lost in that topic.
That's awesome. Awesome. All right. We'll talk soon.
Yep. Great episode.